Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and joining me as always on Tuesday mornings is Edwin Eisendrath, and he hosts the show on Friday on right here in Lincoln Square called It's the Democracy Stupid, which is also the name of his Substack. So thank you so much for being here, Edwin.
Thank you, Susan. We have a lot to talk about.
We
Wow.
do. And we were just talking before the show about the latest news with Pam Bondi testifying and saying that you are going to get some very special guests coming to your city of Chicago soon.
Yeah. Well, first off, just because she testifies and says it under oath doesn't mean I have to believe it, right? But apparently, the Texas National Guard is on its way to Chicago because Greg Abbott thinks it's the 1860s and going to beat those Yankees, And Pam Bondi testified that Kash Patel and Todd Blanche, two of her top henchmen, are on their way to Chicago. Look, the federal government has one goal in Chicago. It has nothing to do with crime. It has nothing to do with immigration. It has everything to do with causing um, um, a city to have enough anguish so that it looks like there's a call for an Insurrection Act. And what we have is coercive federal government here. Yesterday, they from the roof, one of their snipers shot a gas pellet into the neck of a priest who was standing outside praying, just standing there praying. Right? They already shot into another pellet into a news van,
Right.
Just because they could. They are out of control on purpose. It is if there's a riot in Chicago, it is a riot caused by the federal overreach that is inciting in every possible way. And people are firm, but they're showing they're patient, but they are very firm. They're not willing to let the federal government come in here and do like they did last week, rappelling out of a Black Hawk helicopter into an apartment building. Are you kidding me? And, people are saying, oh, it's just like the military. It's just like the military. But I bet you if I had a general on here and I was talking to him, they would tell you that the military is better behaved, that the military has rules of engagement, that the military is better trained than these thugs who are in our city trying their best to beat people up and cause a reaction. The courts heard this. There was no cause to send them into Oregon. Thursday, they're going to hear the case here, and they're going to say there's no cause to send them here. But they're not, Trump isn't going to wait for the courts, and then he's going to be slow to obey the courts if he does. It's enormously dangerous. And I want to say to people in the state of Texas, if you think you're at war with Illinois, then we don't have a country anymore.
Right.
And that's not good for you. That's not good for you. You're not at war with Illinois. You probably have relatives here. This is not how we make a nation. One state's troops going in an effort not to help the residents of another state, but to subjugate them. You have got to be kidding. Right. Is that really what you feel like? Is that really the America you want? Because someday the shoe's going to be on the other foot, and you don't want that. None of us wants it. So Don't bring this.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about the balkanization in this country. I mean, you see it being stoked from the top at the White House. Trump is using this government shutdown to try and specifically inflict pain on democratic cities like New York, withholding funds. But they're really trying to sow this idea that we are two countries. There's the good part of the United States that backs President Trump, that voted for him, a lot of the states in the South, versus, the elites on the coast, and they're not really American. And so it's okay to do what they want. It's okay to send troops to invade those cities because they're not really part of this country. That's such a dangerous mindset, that this idea that we're somehow still fighting the battles of the Civil War. And of course, this kind of rhetoric is coming directly from Trump. It's probably being fed to him by Stephen Miller. because Stephen Miller can't wait for Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act. This is something he has been waiting for. And in fact, Trump was asked yesterday in the Oval Office if he would invoke it. And, again, he said, hey, I might have to, look at that, rogue judge in Oregon who's stopping me from deploying the National Guard. And Stephen Miller has, basically declared that Trump is the state. He's Louis the 14th. And anything you do against Trump is an act of war against the United States. I mean, think about how ridiculous that would be if, like, Jen Psaki stood up there, during the Biden administration, said, anything you say about President Biden, that's an act of war against the United States. She'd be laughed at. And we would rightly say that is an extremely dangerous mentality, and it is antithetical to the nature of this country.
Yeah, Susan, America really isn't balkanized. That's the thing. You look at all the polling data, and on all of these big questions, there's a massive agreement in America. I mean, there's the 30-ish% of people who can't see past their fascination with Donald Trump, but most people on most issues agree about America. They agree we're going in the wrong direction. They don't like troops in the cities like this. They don't like what he's done on immigration. They can't stand what he's doing in the economy and in inflation. They don't want the government to hide the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. I mean, there is massive agreement. So what does Donald Trump do? He tries to divide us. He tries to make us hate each other so much we don't understand what we do. And yesterday, I heard him just absolutely laugh out loud, tell the country that there are beautiful Black women in Chicago wearing MAGA hats, so happy he's getting rid of these illegal immigrants who are taking their men's jobs. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, laughable, stupid effort to divide Black and Latinos in Chicago, all of whom loathe Donald Trump.
Right.
I mean,
it's so heavy-handed, and like that AI video he put out with Hakeem Jeffries with the sombrero on his head. I mean, but, he thinks that these tactics still work, even though, as you pointed out, the polling says otherwise.
Well, they work in the only part of America he cares about, and those are his, his brown shirts, his shock troops that he wants in our streets. I mean, look, I've watched what these ICE and Customs and Border Patrol people are doing on our streets. They're not trained officers.
Yeah.
They're thugs in masks. Trained officers don't behave this way. We have laws that govern how you can police in America, and they're breaking them on a regular basis. And I expect that, states will start arresting and having warrants for Customs and Border Patrol people who shoot priests, right, for fun. This is not legal. And it's going to take a while because the federal government is powerful, and Donald Trump is using that power, but he's abusing it. He's using it illegally, and it's going to catch up to him, but at enormous cost and enormous damage to individuals and to the social fabric of the country.
Yeah. And, like so many people, I've read the stories about what's going on in Chicago, storming an apartment complex by helicopter. I mean, people getting killed at routine traffic stops, these really heavy-handed tactics by ICE. But I wanted to hear from you because this is the city you love. You were born here. You've never left, for the most part. I know you travel,
Sure.
But this is your home, and that's I still consider it to be my home in many ways since I was born there. What is it like living in a city where you have the president of the United States declaring war on it? What is that like?
Well, look, here's what's so misleading for people, because Chicago is lovely. And when the weather, weirdly, this late in the season is as beautiful as it is, people are walking by the river, they're out in the parks, they're dining outside. And you have to say to yourself, what was Paris like in 1941? People were, yes, it was under Nazi occupation, but life found a way to go on. Mm-hmm. It's misleading in some ways, right? Because you have this wonderful life going on, and these uh, um, illegal, cruel outrages happening, a few blocks away, right? It's really schizophrenic in a way. Our city is not free; it's under siege, and that doesn't mean that every single person feels it every moment,
Right.
right? Because it's an enormous city. But when ICE drops in ways that again our military wouldn't do, when ICE drops in ways, ICE, Customs, Border Patrol, whoever these people are, they leap out of their cars and grab parents away from children. They zip tie children. They march people out of apartment buildings naked in the middle of the night. They claim that an entire block is guilty because they think they know that somebody's there, and so ICE rolls down a neighborhood street and throws gas grenades, and parents and their kids coming home from school are caught in this. This is appalling. And so let me go back to where I began. So when it's beautiful and those people are strolling by the river or they're out in the parks, what are they talking about? They're talking about the outrages that are happening in the other part of town. It's weighing heavily on the souls of people in the city. Even if you just dropped in and looked, you wouldn't see it, right? You would see a lot of life going on in places as it normally does. And yet everyone in this city is fully aware of the illegal, coercive occupation of the federal government in this city. And starting today, the even worse, this notion that the National Guard from Texas and from other states are coming up here with the intent to try and subjugate this great American city. That is not going to happen. It cannot possibly end well. Cannot possibly end well. And the President of the United States wants to see bloodshed in our streets so that he can have a military rule in America's cities. Then it's like, okay, overdone. It was a nice run while we had it, but that's not what Americans want. That's not what Americans want. And we aren't going to, and you know what? I don't think that's what American soldiers want either. I still don't believe that when they are ordered to Tiananmen Square, Americans, that they will follow that order. I don't believe it.
I was thinking about the fact that you had a priest who was shot, and that would be just the end of any other administration, any other president. I mean, it's something that is just so symbolic of what should not be happening here on the streets of America, and it's being ordered by the White House. And I also think about the fact that there have been so few stories out there about who these shock troops are in ICE. They wear masks for a reason. They're hiring at a huge pace. I think another underreported story is that a lot of your local police departments are starting to be understaffed because they're losing people to ICE because they're being paid ridiculous amounts of money to terrorize people. But, the one thing that we can speculate is that this is a jobs program for J6ers, but there have not been the investigative stories about who these people are, what qualifications they have, if any. And
right, Susan, in every police force in America, every city wants to know who are the police, how are they trained, how are they trained to de-escalate so they don't cause violent problems. And by the way, most police do a great job, but if somebody does cross a line, they get held accountable. And God knows Chicago's paid out a lot of settlements for police misconduct, right? What makes the federal government think that they are not accountable to the same standards that everyone else is accountable for when they come in to try and police something? Right. And the answer is Donald Trump told them they're not accountable. Donald Trump told them, break any law you want, I'll pardon you.
Right. And the U.S. Supreme Court has given him a helping hand by saying, go ahead and racially profile people.
And the Supreme Court outrageously, we call them Kavanaugh stops, because Justice Kavanaugh seems to think as a Supreme Court judge, oh, it's no big deal if they get detained. It's no big deal. We'll just check and they'll be free later. I mean, this is an outrage. it's very hard. It's very, I mean, I'll guess
I
I'll
mean,
try.
one of the things we fought a war for, during the Revolutionary War is being innocent before you're proven guilty, as opposed to in the British system where it's the opposite. And now you can be assumed guilty on the street just because of the color of your skin. And Justice Kavanaugh has said, hey, it's all good. If you're innocent, you'll be found innocent. But, they have every right to assume that you're not.
Look, I mean, I guess let's talk about the Supreme Court for a minute, because they have a monumental term coming. They're entering a term where they're going to decide cases ranging from whether the tariffs are legal to undoubtedly the use of force in our cities. And you would hope that coming to this, America would have confidence in the Supreme Court. And this court, and we're now in the 20th year of John Roberts' leadership, has lost the confidence of America. His systematic erosion of voting rights, his systematic attack on civil rights, his craven support of Donald Trump, and his determination that money is more important than people at every opportunity has lost him the support of the American people. So I don't know what this support, what this court can find that anybody's going to find legitimate. And that is a real problem for America. And it's a problem that John Roberts owns. John Roberts owns. And when we finally get our democracy back, we have the biggest cleanup job to do, like, ever. Right? Because they've destroyed institutions that matter. They've destroyed the credibility of the Supreme Court. They are trying to destroy the entire federal government apparatus so that it can't serve us. And they've destroyed any comedy between states by saying, you know what, we're going to send our army to occupy you. Like, right. Okay. Are they still mad about Reconstruction? Because, like, Reconstruction, they got rid of those armies and they opposed 100 years of Jim Crow. Right. They do not have any moral high ground. Not a shred of it.
Yeah. And as far as institutions that need to be rebuilt, I would definitely say the media is a big part of that. I mean, I can't tell you, every day I wake up and I am so embarrassed by the coverage that I see from the National Press Corps, where they refuse to press this president on even the most basic matters, like, why do you keep disappearing for a few days? What's up with that? But to me, one of the great symbols of where our media is at is Bari Weiss, who founded the Free Press. And she's now been installed as the new head of CBS News, which used to be the gold standard in news. But, going back, her history is, she got a job as a New York Times columnist, which, is a highly prestigious position. But her work was so substandard. There were so many corrections that they had to issue on her columns, if you can call them that. I mean, I would have fired interns, that I hired back in college, working on my college paper. But there is always a double standard for conservatives in opinion journalism, where they don't have to get their facts right. As long as they represent a certain viewpoint, they get special treatment for that. And as somebody who has written a progressive column for, about 20 years, I've seen that firsthand, where my work was nitpicked, and every link was checked. But then the conservative columnists who appeared on the opposite page, would just make these broad statements. Obama is a socialist, and never had to back anything up. And that's kind of how we've gotten here today. And, her version of, just asking questions conservatism is such a hack job. She claims to be about free speech. But, first of all, she spent all her time in college trying to silence people on the other side of the Israel-Palestine question, especially Palestinian people. She claims to be about freedom, but she never questions all the freedoms that Trump is ripping away from us, about Trump invading our cities. I mean, really, to me, it just shows that elite conservatism is just a veneer to make fascism seem acceptable. And now she will be heading up CBS News and, pushing it ever rightward, which is just incredibly damaging.
You know what? What was really damaging too is CBS,
Yeah.
because things change. They were the top. They were the most respected. They aren't anymore. They're going to collapse under her leadership. She's never been a journalist. There's a difference between. I'm like, neither have I. There's a difference between being I'm talking about opinion and doing news reporting, right? And CBS is about news reporting. She doesn't know anything about it, not anything.
And I want to give a little shout out to Jennifer Schulze, who is your spouse, but just a fabulous journalist who does media criticism. And she doesn't just say, here's what's bad. She incorporates journalism. She interviews experts, and she brings that into her media criticism, which is how it should be done.
Well, one of the reasons why I know the difference between me and an actual journalist is I live with an actual journalist. And it's a different skill set. Right? It's a really important skill set. It's not one that Bari Weiss has. And so she's leading the news side. She's not leading the corporate side. She's leading the news side. So okay, this is what, this happens in the business world all the time. You got a company, it was on top, and then 10 years later, it's not on top. Marlboro was the most powerful brand in the world for a while. It's not anymore, and that's why new news organizations are springing up around the country, including Lincoln Square, to fill the void that was created when corporate media and organizations like CBS failed America in this moment.
Right.
Failed. And that's so I smile when you talk about Bari Weiss, because that just means that new organizations like this one are going to be how people get news in the future. And there are a lot of real news, not just opinion, but real news efforts going on in the country that weren't going on 10 years ago. That are fabulous, and people can get their news, and we have to make sure that we help find a way for them to get that news, because they aren't going to get it from CBS like CNN lost its way, and I might add, lost its viewership at the same time.
Absolutely.
You can't all chase the Fox crowd. You just can't. Plus, you'll never make them happy.
And, as we see in poll after poll, Trump doesn't have this mandate. He doesn't have majority support. And, way back when, a couple decades ago, news media made the decision that they wanted, TV news media in particular, they were chasing profitability, making sure they made as much money as possible. Well, the way you would do that now is to cater to an audience of people who the majority are not fans of what Donald Trump is doing. But the corporate ownership has gotten so consolidated, and all they want to do is appease Trump, pay him bribes like CBS and ABC already have, over stories that were completely legitimate that they reported. And they're suddenly, us, the consumers, we're not the top priority. Their top priority is making sure that the king feels good about himself, and that he doesn't get as sad when he turns on late night television and sees Jimmy Kimmel cracking wise.
Well, this is the oligarchy they want to create, right? He gets to decide which of them becomes rich and powerful, and that depends on how they support him. And it's not limited to the media. I mean, the board of Columbia University and the faculty of Columbia University had a different idea what to do a few years ago. And the board said, we are going to cave to the president and give him everything he wants. And they took that once great university and sent it down its merry way. Harvard is fighting back for how long, who knows? It's a tough fight because the president is weaponizing every piece of the federal government to go after anybody who has the courage and the spine to stand up. And my city is right there right now. And we aren't going to cave, no matter how many troops he sends. But it's the same thing, right? For the glory of Donald Trump.
Right.
May his statue in gold rise forever. But, that's not us. And that's not the people of Texas. It's not the people of you pick the red state. It's just not, they don't want this either. They just don't want it either. And, but what we really need, Texans, again, I'm talking to you, lean on your House reps, will you? Just lean on them. just a few of them, 2 of them, for gosh sakes, to say enough is enough. This isn't what we signed up for, and it'll go away. That's it. You just need a little bit of spine from you, if you care about America.
Let's talk about this federal government shutdown. It's now, about a week old. Edwin, tell us, what's your take on everything, and how do you see this ending? Do you see this ending?
Yeah, the federal government shutdown is not 2 weeks old, Susan.
No, a week.
It's not a week old. It's now a couple months old because it began with Doge, and it has continued, as the Trump administration has said, the government enacted by Congress doesn't matter. I'm closing it down. Ask the people in the Department of Education whether the shutdown began a week ago or began a couple months ago, right? Ask anybody who was relying on USAID whether the government shutdown began a week ago or months ago. The Republicans do not want to have the government that we have. They can't change it by law, so they're changing it by fiat. They're changing it by refusing to spend the money that Congress has put out there. They're changing it by such outrageous demands that no one in their right mind would vote for continuing to do what they do. So this is their shutdown.
Yeah.
And do I see it ending anytime soon? Maybe, but it will require a lot of pressure on Republicans. And last time they caved when the air traffic controllers said, I'm sorry, you keep telling us to show up at work and we're not getting paid.
Right.
We're not going to do it. And air traffic started to slow down all over America.
And last night, Governor Newsom in California said that they had no air traffic controllers in the Burbank airport. So it's starting already.
Yep. Right. So things like that are going to happen. Because it turns out the federal government does a lot of things we need.
Absolutely.
Right? And the way these work, these shutdowns, is a lot of employees are told they have to work without pay, and they'll get paid when the shutdown ends.
Yeah, but how can you trust Donald Trump to make good on anything?
And how can you afford to you have to go into debt while you wait? I mean, these aren't people sitting with fortunes they can draw down. That's not what's going on here.
Right. And members of Congress, they're still getting paid. Donald Trump.
Oh, wait. Yes. And every day, the Republicans declare another day of vacation.
Right.
They won't even show up for work because they're afraid that if they do, they'll be forced to discharge a petition on Jeffrey Epstein.
Right. That's why they have not sworn in their latest member of Congress who won her election weeks ago in Arizona, but she still has not been seated, which is completely anti-democratic. But the reason for this is that they do not want Thomas Massie, who is a very conservative Republican from Kentucky, but it is his petition to discharge the Epstein files. And Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, is terrified of that.
Terrified. And you know what? Giving time to Pam Bondi to alter those files, which of course is going to happen.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm sure they're in the basement now. It's like, wait, that page says Donald Trump did what? No, we got to put something else in.
They had reports that 1,000 FBI officers were on this instead of, perhaps being dispatched and preventing, mass shootings that happen every day, or trying to solve major crimes out there. No, you have the National Guard picking up trash in Washington, D.C., and you have FBI agents in some basement trying to search for Donald Trump's name and redact it.
Yes, right. You have the government doing everything except its job.
Right.
Donald Trump is doing everything except the job he's elected to do. The members of Congress and the Republican Party are doing everything except the job. In fact, they're being told not to show up for work. You have the government directed not to do its job.
Right.
And you have the federal judiciary actually doing its job and the Supreme Court telling them stand down.
Right. We'll make all the decisions. And the Supreme Court suddenly has no use for the lower court system, even though this was established, for 250 years. But they know what's best. Just put all the power in their hands.
Susan, they either win everything or they are going to lose everything, and they know it. That's where we are. And this is on them. They're the ones who pushed all the chips into the pot. We didn't say we were in an existential war with you. When Joe Biden was president, we didn't say this is an existential war. We have to bomb Mar-a-Lago.
No,
We didn't do any of that. We
no,
said,
there's
look,
a
there's
lot
a
of
clear
evidence. There's a lot of evidence his legislation, his post-COVID, recovering legislation disproportionately went to red states that voted against him, but
Right.
sending a lot of jobs in green energy and a lot of, help with healthcare to those states, because you know what? We're all Americans. And if some people need a little more help than others, that's the way this works. We don't go to war with each other.
Well, right, but they did. They did.
Yes.
They said it's all our chips are in the pot. And you hear from the president, you hear from Pam Bondi, you hear from Kash Patel, you hear speeches by our civilian leadership to the military saying a good chunk of America, the majority of America, is an enemy of our country. And that is, of course, a lie. It's a dangerous lie. And I do not believe he will forcibly take over the country. I believe he will fail. But there is no question this is an attempt to do that.
Right.
And then all their chips are in the pot. And when we win, and ultimately at the cost of bloodshed, we will win. And when we do, they had better be prepared for the reckoning and the justice that will come.
And I'm just so struck by the fact that, we have a slowing economy. We have job reports are being suppressed, but we know that unemployment is rising. Inflation is definitely rising. All you have to do is go to the grocery store and you know that. So meanwhile, as people are trying to make ends meet, we have Republican members of Congress who don't feel any obligation to show up and do their jobs. They're just fine shutting down the government because they're the ones who are always telling us that the government doesn't work and it's worthless, but they're the ones who aren't working. You and I would get fired if we didn't show up to work. For them, that's just an added bonus for going along with Trump's continuing destruction of the federal government and the federal workforce. But I mean, really,
Susan, it wouldn't occur to you not to show up for work. It
No.
isn't that you get fired for it. I served in the federal government. It is an enormous privilege. And you know what? No one serves in it forever. So you take the time that you're there and you work like a dog for the American people because you have a short time and you can do wonderful things to help this country. And the fact that they are there saying, we have this privilege. We have this privileged moment where we can actually help make America better. And we're going to use it by getting paid to go play golf and not show up for work. It isn't that we'd get fired for that. It wouldn't occur to us in our wildest dreams to be that irresponsible.
Right. And then there's also the arrogance that, a lot of these Republican members of Congress refuse to meet with their constituents because they don't want to be held accountable by people who elected them. And this goes even people who are in really safe red districts in red states, because they saw what happened with Joni Ernst, who is a senator in Iowa, a state that has been extremely red for more than a decade at this point. But when they were debating the budget bill, and even conservative constituents were saying people are going to die if you cut healthcare, and she said we're all going to die. And
now she's not running.
Right now she's not running because the backlash was so much, and Republicans are scared to face their own voters.
Again, though, the upside of that, right, is where we talked about before. Those voters, red state Republican voters, do not like what's going on.
No.
Right? And I'm going to say to them, we share that. But the ability to stop it is in your hands.
Yeah.
The ability to resist it, the obligation to resist it is in our hands. Because, but you can actually put an end to it. You can. You could do it now.
You have to decide that having a stronger economy where you're not losing your job and where you can afford to buy your kids clothes for back to school, you have to decide that and not having, shock troops on our streets, that's more important than the satisfaction you get out of owning the libs. And you might find some folks on the left to be annoying, and that's fine. But you know what? Is it worth owning those people that annoy you? for the country to fall apart? Is it worth it for your personal finances to fall apart? I don't think it is.
Wait till the horror of the healthcare cuts hit. You know,
I think
millions.
it's going to be worse than anyone thinks.
Well, not worse than you and I know, right?
But, it's way beyond anybody who is on Medicaid because it affects all of our rates.
And hospitals will close.
Right.
And, I mean, I just, I'm waiting for farmers to figure out that getting bailed out as opposed to earning your way out is not how they want to live. And besides, they don't want to have to drive 11 hours to a hospital. And once in a while, it'd be nice to find a neighborhood school in rural America. All of this is in jeopardy because of these guys. And I don't know if they're not doing good things for rural America, and their answer for urban America is to send in the troops, right? Who are they for? Because they aren't, right? They're for themselves. Yeah, they're for themselves. They're on the golf course getting paid, not using this precious time when you could move America forward. What they got hired to do,
Right.
And it's
Trump was supposed to fix everything, and yet everything is breaking.
Well, that's what he meant by fix. I'll fix it. He meant that I'll fix it for me and his family, right?
And the fix is in. His family has amassed how many billions since he's been in office?
I don't know. How do we know?
Right. Again,
I mean, the reporting was 3+ billion, right?
Yeah.
But it's all a secret.
Right. Right.
And Pam Bondi won't answer a question when she's asked in front of, under oath. She, instead of answering the question, she's like, well, why didn't you ask Merrick Garland? Okay, A, you said you'd solve this problem. You're sitting there. You're the attorney general. If you don't want the job, leave.
Right. Yeah. And who knows how long she'll last anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, give it to Kash Patel next. There's no
until he's coming to Chicago, right? Isn't that
what I hear? That's what I hear. Right.
Well, if you bump into him, please take some video. I'm sure we'd all want to see it, especially with him standing about 2 feet shorter than the ICE troops out there. Probably.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to seeing any of these people.
No,
I've already seen some of the ICE stuff, and it's appalling. It doesn't belong here. He doesn't belong here. The Texans should stay in Texas. I mean, they'll love it here. It's a nice city. Right. When they're not on the roof sniping at priests, they will, they'll find the city is charming. Maybe they'll stay. Maybe they'll move, have a good life, But it's really past time for the folks in Red America to say enough. We're not going away, we folks in these cities. We will survive this. We are shedding blood on our streets. I mean, one person's killed, another person was shot. We're shedding blood on our streets.
Yeah.
And it's for what? For what principle? For the principle that we should all be divided and hate each other, right? That for the principle that Donald Trump should practice sending lethal troops of the United States to our cities so that next election he can surround the polling places to claim he is protecting the election in order to steal it again. This is not, we're not going to let it happen. And we will shed that blood. But heaven help the people in another part of the country who don't stand up when this matters. History will be very ugly for them. And I'm not talking about retribution. I'm not talking about going after their families. God, I don't want their Republican appointed judges' houses blown up.
No.
Blown up and burned down like we saw this week for a Democratic appointed judge. I'm not talking about that kind of violence. I'm just saying the weight of destroying a great democracy rests on the people who do not step up in this moment.
Right. And there has to be legal accountability. That is a lesson I think we have all learned after January 6th. Justice has to be served, and it probably has to be a little bit quicker too.
Well, we know that about all criminal justice. Severe isn't the answer to reducing crime, but swift and certain is.
Absolutely. Well, Edwin, we'll look forward to you coming back on Friday for
I
your
look
own
forward
show.
to it.
And I know we'll probably have a key court case in the National Guard fight that you'll be talking about. So don't miss Edwin. He is back at 1 p.m. Eastern here in Lincoln Square for It's the Democracy Stupid. And Edwin and I will be back next Tuesday to talk about what's going on in the world and the Trump administration in the week to come. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody.